call. All right, so we're still here at the opening of Parliament. The President has just addressed the nation. You all know that we have been engaging with young people throughout the whole day, profiling them. We have a number of young people who have come into the 7th administration, a number of young people who've also taken office in the executive as ministers and deputy ministers. And joining us this evening, we have a segment called #The Youth Take Oath, is none than the other, Minister Soli Malati, who is the Minister of Communications and Digital Technologies. Minister, good evening.
Good evening to you, and it's good to see you.
It's good to see you too. I'm really excited. We are all excited as young people to have many of you in the executive. How are you feeling right now about the task ahead?
Look, it's a massive responsibility. The first 2 weeks were just overwhelming in terms of getting to understand the state of the department and speaking to as many stakeholders, both internally and externally, so that even in framing the vision, it's informed by what you find inside, but it's an inclusive process of what the stakeholders are also saying. And getting into the third week where we had our budget vote, on Monday, presenting plans that were formulated ahead of you. But, once you are in there, you can't be selective about which moments are yours, which ones aren't. And quite really, I'm refreshed and I'm excited about the task ahead. I think there is a new opportunity of just new energy that has also infused the public service, and the ultimate beneficiary can only be South African people.
Absolutely. So we had a number of conversations with different young MPs, right? I mean, the chairperson of basic education was there, Joy Maimela. We had also young people who are serving in the portfolio committee on higher education, and those actually serving on the committee of science and innovation. And everyone raised the importance of us creating access to education through technology. Speaking about access to Wi-Fi, speaking about online learning. What are your thoughts around using technology to increase access to education?
No, it's a very important thing. There are two barriers currently. One is, the infrastructure that guarantees connectivity. Secondly is, in order to be connected, you need devices, right? And that is another stumbling block. Currently, because of our tax regime, smartphones are considered a luxury item. As a result, there's an added tax to them, which drives the cost of those, which means that you have to be either economically superior in order to afford those. And one of the things I'm really passionate about driving in is engaging the Treasury about we need to have a threshold in terms of what constitute luxury goods, so that we can't have, smart devices being an obstacle to either young people learning on those platforms and using those devices, or even entertainment. For entertainment, it's good for the general mood of being, or life can't just be about work and no balance of entertainment. But also the digital economy is going to be a major contributor in terms of investment and job creation. And I was very inspired by the President's speech around finding regulations that are an inhibitor to investment opportunities and eliminating those, so that we can unleash a new army of digital entrepreneurs, but also have young people enthused about learning. This whole thing about technology can be so powerful because not every learner is going to have the means eventually to be able to afford public transport to go to a school. But if we can put devices in learners' hands and have them connected, then even the process of learning becomes much more innovative. It can catch up with international trends, and we can just have an entire generation of young people that are empowered differently.
So, Minister, I really believe that the manner in which a department like yours and many other departments can go about achieving some of these things is through social compacting and working with your other departments. Science and innovation, there's so much work that's being done there currently in increasing access to internet connectivity, electricity. You need to meet with him, all right? And so do you envision yourself having conversations with multiple stakeholders so that you have like an enclave of support in order for you to achieve what you want to achieve?
No, absolutely, and I think that's what the spirit of the GNU is inculcating in all of us, because some of these common problems have transversal impact on the delivery of government services. And across departments, we face the same problems. We have to be the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies that drives technology, the embracing of technology throughout the government system. But each and every department in government has an ICT department. What does it do, in the bigger picture, and what are some of the programs that are there in place? Because there's a lot of duplication, right? And we have to embrace the sense that, we have to, one, do things digital literacy, and that just, goes beyond school kids, but also within the public service, even within, public officials, and you know this very well, that, even at our level, there are not people who are, that savvy in order to be effective, so that we can then reduce time we spend on printing documents, going through printing documents, and can let people focus on the outputs of their work. So that is one of the ways that we aim to do that.
All right. Well, there you have it, citizens of South Africa. That is Minister Solly Malatsi. I think he's just over 35, right? So generally he's young. The IPU would definitely say you're young. We're so excited, and I must say we are committing to supporting you. We want you to succeed, and we know you have the support of your Deputy Minister, of course, who has lots of experience in this space, but you need the support of Intanga Zako, and we are making that commitment under hashtag the Youth Take Oath. Back to the studio. Yeah? Yeah? Well, let's that side. All right, so we're still here with hashtag the Youth Take Oath, profiling young MPs. I'm joined by Honorable Bax. I call him Bax. We serve together on the Portfolio Committee on Higher Education, Science and Innovation in the 6th administration, and you were absolutely brilliant. You moved into basic education. You championed issues around pit latrines and infrastructure in general in the basic education system. But now you're the entire Deputy Chief Whip of the Democratic Alliance. Congratulations. How are you feeling right now?
Look, thank you so much. I'm feeling really great right now. It's a new responsibility. It's a new challenge. We get put in these spaces because we are capable to make a meaningful difference, and serving in such a massive role and leading such a huge caucus to make sure that we hold our own in Parliament, in making sure that whoever's in the executive from our own and those that are in Parliament to play oversight do due diligence and do a solid job in doing so. So it's my responsibility to make sure that I charted the way forward of that, and making sure that members of Parliament that took an oath of office know exactly what they need to do to make sure that they serve South Africans, uphold the rule of law in this country, and make sure that the legislation that we make in Parliament is responsive to the challenges that South Africans do face, so that they can change their lives for the better.
Thank you. So I really want to know how the work that you began in the 6th administration will continue into the 7th administration, because you really made a great impact on basic education. Are you deliberate about how you're working with the young person, hopefully young person, who's been deployed to basic education? What's your plan? Because I feel like success and continuation is very important.
Look, I think we've got a great minister that's been there, young, in our age as well, age group, and she was our former chief whip. So I think at this point in time, she's got solid plans to make sure that children can read for meaning, because if a child can't read, they're doomed before they even beginning, at the start of their early age. And the president announced today about early childhood development and how making sure that access must be access to quality education, so that we can utilize that particular education to participate tomorrow. But also the environment must be conducive. I, for one, almost fell in a pit toilet when I was, still in school in grade 1. So that's why it's a massive passion for me. And I think the person that's in there has outlined solid plans to make sure that is addressed. And today the president also regurgitated that particular plan. So I think it's very, very important for us to have an oversight responsibility in Parliament as a Deputy Chief Whip to make sure that we follow up on those plans, so that they are implemented, so that the schools are changed for the better, so that the environment is more conducive for a child in the deep rural areas of Tsolo, and a child who's in Kailija or a child who's in Wynberg is getting good quality education, so that we don't manage the quality of outcome, but we manage the quality of opportunity that they get the best.
Last one. So in our conversation with the many young people we spoke to throughout the day, young MPs, the issue around the youth caucus and the youth parliament came up. You're a deputy chief whip now. Hopefully you'll have a little bit more space to influence how parliament positions itself. Can you commit to attempting to ensure that we have an active youth parliament that's not only an event, but is actually entrenched into the systems of parliament, and an active youth caucus?
Look, I think as young people, we have a big responsibility to influence decision making. There's absolutely no way we can sit on the sidelines and not participate and make sure that we push the agenda of young people. I mean, 7 out of 10 young people can't find work. Even those that are qualified, gold standard robots, wearing their graduation gowns. So it's important for us not just to discuss in a youth parliament, but to say, how do we influence the program of government to implement things that are going to take youth out of unemployment into opportunity, into jobs. And in us doing so, we've got a responsibility not just to engage on our own, but what are the ministers doing towards that? What is the government doing towards that? And holding them accountable to make sure that people's lives are tangibly changed for the better. And definitely in opposition, I will whip it into shape to make sure that people at least do the bare minimum that is required of them, so that young people don't stand on unemployment queues, but rather are in the tax queues to contribute in our economy.
Awesome. Well, that's Honorable Baxolile Notata. He's no stranger to many of us. He's now the Deputy Chief Whip. Thank you so much. We'll now be joined by Honorable Cyril. He's the Deputy Minister, one of the Deputy Ministers of Finance. And Usos Mali, we want the money. Thank you so much for joining us, Deputy Minister. Congratulations, and we wish you all the best. Deputy Minister, the whole day on hashtag the Youth Take Oath, we've been speaking about young people, right? Young people who've ascended into power or responsibility as deputy ministers, as ministers, but also as MPs. A lot of the ideas we may come with ultimately need funding. And you are sitting closer to the purse. Tell us how we can ensure that we have finances to fund the many ideas that could contribute to youth development.
Yeah, so I think what we've got to first do as young people is to say that the expenditure patterns we've seen for the last 10 years, particularly from 2010 to 2018, was unproductive. It went into bailouts. It didn't go into investment. And when you invest in, there are two things we know from IMF data, World Bank data, BRICS Bank data, it doesn't matter what your ideology is. When you invest in people through healthcare and education, and when you invest in the infrastructure that enables people to do what they want to do, you get good outcomes. When you throw it at bad things, so firstly, we've got to, as young people, push back hard against unproductive spending, which is what we have seen in governments. And we've got to tell the state that the priorities need to change. And one of those priorities has to be investment into young people, because we've got a young population. South Africa's got one of the youngest populations in the world. Our average age now is 30. And so we've got to channel that investment into enabling people to live lives that they value. And that's what we've got to do. So the expenditure patterns that we've seen for the last 10 years have to change. And so you're absolutely right. And what can we do as young people? Obviously lobby very hard, attend public participation meetings and budgets. Don't wait for someone else to do it. If we don't do it ourselves, nobody else is going to do it. And if your voice isn't in the room as a young person when public participation happens in your local council budgets, your ward committees, in parliament, you're going to be drowned out by the special interests who do make sure they're in the room at that time. So that's how we channel this investment away from unproductive spending and into things that matter to people. So that's what I would urge young people to do. And certainly in National Treasury, that's what I'm picking the right fights on at the moment. And as a young person, of course, I'm there to fight for what is right.
Sure. I mean, I'm glad you're looking into unproductive spending, because I think that there are a lot of funds that are channeled towards youth development, towards upskilling, reskilling in various departments, but they sort of need to be coordinated. Can you just give your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, I mean, there are several things. There's a lot of duplication in governments, and there are lots of bursary programs and so on. But at the end of the day, it's amorphous. It's a bit of a mess, and it doesn't try to stream young people in. So, I mean, one of the things that Treasury does, and they do this well, I'll give them credit, is the public service says you must have 3 years of experience to get in to a decent role. But the internships that the government offers is only 2 years. Treasury does do 3-year internships. So if we're going to make this legal requirement, why are we not unlocking the barriers? That's one example. So we need to do that. The CETAs, we know, are a black box. And there's a lot of development funding that could be channeled towards young people. But we have CETAs that try to spend money taking themselves on overseas study tours. So we do need a coordinating. you know this firsthand. So we need to move that spending again productively, but it needs to be coordinated. And I do think that the NYDA should be repurposed to house all of these things and to begin to say, how do we channel this and how do we deal with structural unemployment? Why are so many young people poor and trapped in poverty? Because you go to school for 12 years, but your skills are mismatched what the economy demands. And so we have people whose families desperately give up everything to get them into universities, not because they've done anything wrong in life, but because the school system hasn't equipped them. And so we've got to channel all of the spending properly, got to skill people appropriately for the demand side of the economy so that people can get in. It's ridiculous that we've got a massive youth unemployment rate, between 50 and 70% depending on the quarter, and then you've got all these vacancies in the economy. It makes absolutely no sense, and that needs to be resolved. And I think there's a role for better coordination there.
Well, there you have it, fellow South Africans. Deputy Minister Ashur Pen, Deputy Minister of Finance. I really hope, Deputy Minister, as the former chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Higher Education, right, that we'll be able to address some of the issues at NSFAS. The money needs to be followed. There's been great investment done there, increased funding for administrative purposes, but we need to follow the money in higher education. I absolutely agree with you. And I really hope we have that discussion with Ms. Luata of the NYDA. We were hoping to actually have the both of you in the conversation earlier on. And we wish you all the best with your 5 years to come, and we'll definitely be there to support you as young people.
I really appreciate that. Thank you so much, and I will take that up with the NYDA.
Right,
I promise.
Well, there we have it. We're heading back to the studio. You've been listening to hashtag the Youth Take Oath here at the opening of Parliament. And I'm really excited to hear the many ideas that young deputy ministers and ministers have in taking this country forward over the next 5 years. Back to studio. We're still here at the opening of Parliament address. We've listened to the President, Cyril Ramaphosa. We've had a day of engaging conversations with young members of Parliament who've been sworn into the 7th administration. And we're almost sort of joined by the big boss of the young people. We're joined by Deputy Minister Steve Litsike. Deputy Minister, thank you so much for coming, and congratulations on your appointment. Any reflections about the next 5 years, what you have installed, and just generally how you're feeling right now?
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I think one must appreciate the President's opening statement to the country, because it's charging the way forward in terms of the framework, the principle, but also the program of action that must take place. Top of the agenda, it's employment, it's economic growth, because we have faced triple threats: poverty, unemployment, and inequality in South Africa, and that we cannot run away from. So whatever that we do, whether into different sectors, paying attention on infrastructure, paying attention on education, on health, all of that, it must benefit the economic growth, because young people have no patience anymore. Women have no patience anymore. Vulnerable groups have no patience anymore. We must do just about implementation of everything that the President has said.
So, we often speak about the first 100 days, right? And we already have seen you hitting the ground. Deputy Minister Litsike is just over 35, under 40. So according to the IPU, she is young. First 100 days, what do you see? 3 practical sort of plans that you see yourself implementing to make sure that young people are brought into confidence on the type of leadership they could see over the next 5 years?
Look, the most important thing is the information that must get to young people. We cannot speak about the National Youth Service and young people don't know about it. So it's about how do we actually make sure there's a spread coverage of township, peri-urban, rural areas, where young people are brought closer to the information, closer to the opportunities, but also where we facilitate access to these opportunities. So we have an opportunity. What the stimulant initiatives that President is talking about, give it to young people. Let young people own these initiatives. And secondly, we know very well. I mean, our mandate as a department is also to look at how we advocate, how we mainstream, but most importantly, how we also monitor some of the intervention. It is our responsibility to move department by department to analyze exactly what is going to happen. So within these first 100 days, we're going to be already telling the departments where you have lacked, but what you need to be prioritizing, at least as kind of a medium-term program. We're going to guard it. We're going to completely look at the mid-term approaches that tells us that our government is moving into the right step, and also our government is actually yielding the results accordingly.
Deputy Minister, there's often an attempt to be, I want to say it as simply as this, wishy-washy, vague about setting targets for transformation, right? I mean, and sometimes women will be made to feel like when they speak about representation of women, oh, there they go again. When we speak about representation of youth, oh, there they go again. Disability, the same thing. LGBTQIA, the same thing. How will we ensure that this laissez-faire approach to transformation is addressed in order for us to inculcate very intentional planning and budgeting? I mean, we were speaking to the Deputy Minister of Finance just now. Very intentional planning and budgeting in order for us to mainstream this type of representation that we want to see.
Look, one of the most important documents I've asked for when I walked into the office is where is the gender transformation budget? Where is it? And I think what's common and what's good is that even coming out of the Khotla just over the weekend, we've agreed on common agenda, gender equality, women prioritization, and most importantly, young people. It's exactly that. So we are actually looking into this conversation directly with Treasury, because you can't speak just about programs without resources. Who is financing, what are we financing, and whether it's transforming lives. So gender transformation approaches, it's exactly what we're adopting. Until we get quite a feminized government, we will reach there. But I'm glad that our president represents exactly that.
Yeah. And also conversations with Stats SA. I mean, often when, having been a member of parliament in the 6th administration, you will ask about a target that's been set, and you look at this target and you think, this is way below what we think it should be targeting, right? And you'll be told, no, it's because, we're informed by the stats. These are the only people who actually have the skills. To some extent, what we're feeling citizens to be communicating to us. People are saying, I'm a young person with a disability. I don't have a job. I have this particular skill. But when we're looking at the annual reports, it doesn't correlate. So conversations with Stats SA?
Look, Stats SA has released the latest census, which was 2022 data. And no doubt the data represents a worrying factor. Part of it is that the number of percentage of young people that are unemployed, while our country has increased the literacy aspect, when you look at the stats in terms of how many graduates we had over 10 years ago versus now, that you have increased how many young people have got access to that, and predominantly women, because there's that resilience approach that women stay in the system when they have the opportunity. But we also need to increase it amongst young men as well, where we want to also just ensure that we elevate dynamics of gender as well. But I think the biggest problem that we have is whether the young people who graduate, who are really much completely achieving this aspect of education knowledge, whether they can translate it to prosperity of the country. That's a concern, because you can't have over 45% of young people unemployed who are educated. That's absurd. So skills are achieved when there is practice. So what we must prioritize, get young people to get the skill opportunities, and to some extent also align them with some of the education aspects that we're talking about, because there's a misalignment that young people who have PhDs or young people with masters, and they become waiters, so they can't apply that knowledge. And I'm not even undermining waiters, because hospitality it's a big, right? So the skill is not translated, the education is not translated. When President 2 years or a few years ago actually announced to say reduce and in fact eliminate the idea that you want experience. How do young people get experience if you don't give those opportunities? So we must be intentional. Transformation is intentional. Skills building is intentional. And I think we must equip these young people and those who are outside or who dropped out of school. We must not leave them behind, because you may not have been exposed to the technical, theoretical or academic scholarly approaches, but your knowledge and your mindset and your will does also contribute to skills building. You can use your hand, you can use absolutely everything. And I think we are a country that have a great future ahead. We must grab it. And we cannot work in silos. We need each other, and we can actually achieve it together.
Awesome. Thank you so much to the Deputy Minister for Women, Youth and Persons with Disability, the Deputy Minister, Steve Lidzike. I think for me personally, I'm excited, even on the issues of budget. We're fighting for them. I mean, CGE wants a bigger budget on higher education. They're doing many investigations around, gender-related issues, but they don't have a big enough budget to get across 50 TVET colleges, 26 universities, abazufika, right? So we commit ourselves to being motor forces to support the amazing work that you plan on doing. Thank you so much, Deputy Minister. Well, that's it from the Deputy Minister, Steve Lidzike, from the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disability. We are here still at the opening of Parliament. The President has spoken to the nation. We've been having many conversations with young people. I am truly inspired by the views and thoughts that young people have, and ours will be to remain to support them. Well, stay tuned for many more reactions. We're heading back to the studio.
We're here getting the reaction still outside of the OPA, outside of Cape Town, and we're speaking to everyone. And right now I have with me Songezo Zibi. He is the leader of Rise Mzansi, as well, of course, as the SCOPA chairperson right now. So we're just getting the reactions from Songezo. Songezo, obviously the president's speech has been said by many people to have been quite ordinary, the usual run-of-the-mill. But I think what everyone knows from this election is that things are not going to be the same as usual. And of course, you have been put into an incredibly important position. Can we ask you, what are you expecting to be able to do as the chairperson of SCOPA, which is one of the most important positions, standing committee in Parliament? What do you want to see in the next 5 years?
Look, I think we have a unique opportunity in that in Parliament and in each of the committees, including SCOPA, there is no political party that has got a majority. For a committee such as ours, a standing committee on public accounts, is potentially a really good thing, because we can finally elevate ourselves a little bit beyond the narrow party political interests where nobody can marshal their numbers to block or to misdirect the work of the committee. My job as chair of SCOPA is to get the committee members to agree on a common agenda for the 5 years, first of all, and secondly, for each of the financial years that are the 5 financial years that are going to make up this term of this administration, and to make sure that we focus on issues that are going to move the needle rather than chasing volume for its own sake. The quality of the work that SCOPA does, the reports that are tabled before Parliament, the remedial actions that are recommended, and the follow-up on those needs to be on the money so that South Africans can get value for the work that Parliament is supposed to do.
A lot of people think that it's convention to have the SCOPA chair part of the opposition. In this particular administration, your party is also part of the GNU. In some ways, you are opposition, but you're also part of the pact. How do you reconcile that? And also, I mean, do you think that you'll still have the ability in your position as Scopa Chair to have the requisite oversight and the requisite ability to actually hold all departments accountable in the way that you should? And of course, I mean, we all know that the ANC has been part of Scopa before, but what are you feeling? Because since then it has been a real convention to have an opposition member, which some might say you guys are not as part of the GNU.
Look, I mean, it's interesting about the convention because in the first parliament, there were two political parties that were both in government. It was the IFP and the ANC. And Scopa did a damn good job of investigating the arms deal. What is needed are MPs who are loyal to the Constitution and the work that Parliament does. And I think we have an opportunity now at this crossroads in South Africa that we're able to do that again. And I'm loyal to the Constitution. I'm loyal to the work that Parliament is doing here. Secondly, I'm not in the executive. Nobody from Rise Mzansi is in the National Cabinet. And therefore, that natural conflict that people fear, that you take decisions on the one side and then you oversee yourself on the other, also doesn't exist in this instance. So I really look forward to doing the work in the committee together with the political parties therein.
And in terms of Rise Mzansi's own agenda and the things that they've been talking about, what they want to see as being part of the main policy of the national government going forward, before you were part of the GNU, do you think that you still have the ability to push some of those issues, or how is it going to work for you as both an opposition party and a party that is in the GNU?
Look, what I'm waiting for is the implementation. I felt that the president plagiarized our manifesto with his speech. I mean, there were several things, Bali, in there. We've said time and time again, if you don't fix municipalities, you cannot fix the economy. The president spoke to that. He spoke about funding legislation and making sure that the commitments that are done have got a sort of the necessary resources. He spoke about the need to manage debt carefully and reduce the cost of debt, and then redirect those savings into social investment, into investing in the economy. The fourth thing he spoke about, infrastructure. I think the president went to bed, read the Rise Mzansi manifesto, and then gave his speech. What we're waiting for is the implementation now.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's been wonderful to hear from Songezo. I think that we obviously understand what Scopa is going to do. We're going to move to Fasia Hassan now, just to have a real conversation with her as a young person, as a woman in Parliament for the first time, even though, of course, she's been a legislator in Gauteng before and a chairperson in Gauteng. And I think one of the questions that I want to ask you before we really get into the meat of it is, how are you feeling about the role? What are you expecting in this particular administration? What are you hoping to achieve?
I think it's always overwhelming to be a young person, to be a woman, all the things you've said. You don't just have the burden of having to, be able to basically interpret for yourself, but also for the millions of people who, yes, elected you here, but also who ultimately said that they're in crisis. Life is really not what they expected it to be, and I think there's just very little room for error. But in terms of expectations for the 7th administration, I know there's a lot of doom and gloom, but I actually think it's very exciting. And I think we're at a very critical moment in our democracy. And in many ways, we have to rise to the occasion. There's no other choice. As elected representatives, we must now rise to what our people need us to be. And that's actually why I'm hopeful. I think there's going to be a lot more inter-party working. We've already seen that. And ultimately, the main reason why everyone's coming together is because the South African people forced us to. And so I think that's really the most exciting part of where we are now.
You have been one of the people that has been put on the Judicial Service Commission, and I think that obviously you're one of the most qualified, being somebody that has got an LLB and is studying for their masters. But for young people, there's always this expectation that they should do better, or that they haven't done as much as they should to be in that particular role. I think that a lot of people that have been watching us today have, because of the youth takeoff, has been really about how are young people taking up their space, and I think you're one of the exemplary, people that have been doing that. Just talk us through a little bit about that particular role, that particular process, how you felt, and what you think that the response has been.
So the Judicial Services Commission, it's one of those sort of heavy hitter committees that everybody tends to see on TV. But you're right, being the youngest person, many were like, well, why is she there, right? And this idea that because you're young, because you're a woman, underqualified or you don't deserve to be there. And we have to defeat all of those stereotypes and all of those glass ceilings. And in fact, it goes back to what I said earlier. There's very little room for error. But the reality is when we take up the space in these spaces, it means that in the next JSC or in the next round, we want to see more young people across political parties, because gone are the days where there are holy cows who are the best at only this particular issue. And I think we're turning that on its head.
Amazing. And I mean, we want to just say also congratulations. We know that you've just newly married, and we think that that's amazing because, again, one of the things that women have had to hit a ceiling of in South African politics is having to balance both, you know, family life and boundaries. And we're wishing you really the best from MDNtv, and we think it's been really great. So well done and congratulations, and we wish you everything of the best in terms of your 7th administration and also this incredibly important role that you're going to be playing.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy that we could continue with the Youth Take Oath, and also looking forward to what we can do as young people in the 7th administration.
And thank you so much. We are absolutely happy with everything that's happened today as the youth take off. We feel that we have done great. I want to welcome my co-host back, Unompendulo. I'm quite sure. I think we've done a great day today. What a day from 5 a.m.
Oh my God.
The youth take off. I think we've been very excited about everything the youth have done.
Yeah.
And before I go back to studio, of course, this is the main brainchild. Is that the word?
I don't know.
The person who had the idea for what this needed to be. So I really want to give her an opportunity to sign off.
Well, let me first start by saying, Bali, thank you so much for agreeing for us to do this. And thank you so much to MDNtv. I think, you see, for us, Bali, we started the conversation around youth representation during our programs with like our constituencies, right? So you'll have a civic education program here, a voter education program there, and young people are saying we want to see more of us. And so regardless of us not being in the space now, we do care about the generational mission of ensuring that there's more young people in those spaces of leadership of the country. And so we wanted to say to citizens that you, young people in particular, you said you want to see more young people. And in the 7th administration, we do have more young people. And today you got to meet a few of them. You understood their backgrounds. I mean, but also I think the key young person was the Speaker of Parliament, Mam Togo, right?
It was.
And you related, Mbali, to Mam Togo's journey, I mean, from a motherhood perspective. So people who weren't listening earlier on, maybe you can just highlight the conversation we had with Mam Togo and why that conversation was important for us to have on the segment, The Youth Take Oath.
Look, I think that Umam Togo already represents young people who come into a parliamentary legislative background and then also have to navigate the idea that you're going to have a family like I do, like she did, and she was the first parliamentarian who had a child in Parliament. I was one of the first in terms of my cohort in the legislature, and just really getting the sense that it's possible and it must be done, and we mustn't have any holy cows about what young people are able to achieve, especially women, because there's so many barriers and hindrances given first the bias and then of course the idea of being the natural primary provider in a home. And I think she really was one of the people that really broke those ceilings. Also being from KZN was an inspiration to people like myself and continues to be, and I hope that you and I will continue to do that now.
Sure. So we started with Mam Togo. She was 29, Mam Togo Titiza, the Speaker of the Parliament. She was 29 when she was sworn into the first National Assembly of Democratic South Africa. Then we had a number of interesting conversations. I mean, the IFP ANC conversation between Joy Maimela and House Chairperson Majosi, they come from way back. Yeah, the EFF chats, they come from way back in the NYDA, you know, and they're here together. So, but what I also appreciate is what they highlighted. I mean, the different young people speaking about access. That came up so many times. I mean, Honorable Chauke, who's visually impaired, she spoke about access. Honorable Khachau, who's serving in higher education, she spoke about access. Honorable Msezane from MKP spoke about access. An ongoing conversation. So young people want a way in, but young people, once they find their way in, also want to succeed. But I also want to call on young people, as a former MPL and a former MP, we're calling on young South Africans to participate and democratic processes. The only way in which we can strengthen our democracy is if we avail ourselves as young people. Attend public hearings, watch parliament, watch committees, not only the OPA when you want to see people's dresses and be fashion police, watch committee meetings and be able to make submissions to committees on how you think they can advance our collective interests as South Africans. We are officially signing out. It's been a difficult task anchoring, but yeah, hashtag the youth take oath. We're sending you back to studio.
And thank you to the lovely Nompendulo and Mbali for joining us here at Parliament TV. And of course, this shows the commitment of Parliament of ensuring that the youth is involved. Now, that marks the end of the opening of parliamentary address by the President, who delivered it today, where he highlighted the administration's comprehensive plans and long-term vision for the upcoming 5-year term.
And that's through Tsepo. Viewers are reminded that the President of the Republic, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, convened this joint sitting of Parliament to deliver his opening of Parliament address as empowered by Section 84 of the Constitution, which grants the President the authority to summon a joint sitting of both houses of Parliament for an extraordinary session to conduct special business. Viewers at home, you can join us tomorrow.